What if I told you that Hamilton's Ferrari was never really prepared for him? What Vasseur has discovered could be one of the most expensive and strange technical errors in the recent history of Formula One? And now the entire paddock talks about it. The arrival of Lewis Hamilton to Ferrari in 2025 was not a simple change of equipment. It was one of the most media and strategic movements of Formula One in the last decade. After more than a decade in Mercedes, where he reached 7 world titles and consolidated his name among the legends of the sport, the British sought a new challenge, one that combined history, prestige, and the opportunity to close his career with a legendary chapter. Ferrari, on the other hand, saw in him not only a pilot capable of winning, but a media figure with the power to attract sponsors, revitalize internal morals, and return the team to the top. But reality hit hard from the first race. The initial results were not up to the media noise. Instead of fighting for victories, Hamilton found himself fighting for mid-points and suffering to match the rhythm of Charles Leclerc, his new teammate. That frustration was accumulating, especially when he noticed that the car did not respond as he expected. His driving style, forged for years to squeeze each tenth in late braless and controlled traction, seemed to collide with the erratic behavior of the SF25. The boiling point came in the Hungary Grand Prix. After a race marked by execution errors and an unpredictable car, Hamilton launched statements that resonated throughout the paddock. "I am absolutely useless like this. Ferrari should change the pilot." These words, more than a simple outbreak, were a call for help disguised as irony. The tension that was breathed inside the box was evident. Engineers and managers knew that something was not right, but until that moment, no one had had the time or determination to open the car and understand the real problem. Frédéric Vasseur, team director, understood that he could not miss the situation. Beyond the sport's impact, the reputation of the Hamilton Ferrari project was at stake. He then ordered a complete review of the car, a thorough technical analysis that would soon be described as a technical autopsy. What they were going to find would not only explain the performance problems, but would reveal an uncomfortable truth. The Hamilton Ferrari and that of Leclerc, although built under the same specifications, were not really the same car in their behavior. When Ferrari engineers dismantled Hamilton's SF25, they did it with the expectation of finding small adjustments out of tolerance or worn components. What they did not expect was to discover a series of failures that, combined, created a car unable to behave predictably. From the first moment, the comparative data with the car of Charles Leclerc showed a disturbing pattern. Under the same track conditions with identical adjustment and tire configurations, Hamilton's car responded with completely different reactions. The root of the problem was in the chassis. Although both cars were manufactured following the same design, the unit assigned to Hamilton presented minimal deviations and structural rigidity. These differences, invisible to the naked eye, translated into a variation in lateral flexion and how the car distributed aerodynamic loads in rapid curves. This caused Hamilton's SF25 to have a more unstable equilibrium point, especially in changes of direction, forcing him to constantly correct the trajectory point. One of the most alarming findings was the behavior of the brake system. Under normal conditions, front and rear discs must reach balanced temperatures to guarantee constant pedal pressure. In Hamilton's car, however, thermal imbalances of up to 80 degrees between axes were recorded. This not only changed the sensation on the return pedal, but even curve. A pilot like Hamilton, who bases much of his performance on the precision of braking and on his extreme sensitivity to the brake touch, was thus forced to guess if the car would stop as expected or if, suddenly, he would lose stability. Spa-Francorchamps was the clearest example. A high-speed spin that was initially attributed to a human error, but now was exposed as a direct symptom of this mechanical failure. The analysis did not end there. The rear suspension, one of the key elements to transfer the power to the ground and keep the car stable in braking, hit a manufacturing defect in one of its lower arms. Under high lateral loads, the piece suffered a microflexion imperceptible to the naked eye but sufficient to alter the wheel geometry in full curve. This affected the angle of fall, the contact of the tire with the asphalt, and consequently, the aerodynamic behavior of the flat background. The result was a car that lost support at the most critical moment of the curve, forcing Hamilton to correct with the steering wheel while trying to keep the path. This set of problems generated a vicious circle. The engineers could not optimize the height of the body because the car did not maintain their planned dimensions, and without a stable height, the SF25 aerodynamics became unpredictable. Any adjustment to gain peak speed compromised curve stability, and any configuration to stabilize the car sacrificed the necessary speed to compete against McLaren or Red Bull. The final diagnosis was clear. Hamilton was not piloting a slow Ferrari, but a fundamentally malad Ferrari. A car that, since its construction, had been trapped in a gray area between official specifications and mechanical reality. The question that was floating in the air inside Maranello was whether it was a quality control failure or if, unintentionally, the development of SF25 had ended up favoring Leclerc's style to the detriment of the British. Vasseur's discovery placed Ferrari in a committed situation, not only at the technical level, but also in the politician and media. In modern Formula One, each 10th loss translates into grid positions, points in the championship and millions in sponsorship revenues. Solving Hamilton's SF25 problems is not as simple as changing pieces. It implies remaking critical components of chassis and suspension, processes that require factory tests, simulator validations, and finally, track test. This means weeks of intensive work and, in the worst case, months before seeing a substantial improvement. Meanwhile, Hamilton faces a huge psychological and sports challenge. Not only should he adapt to a car that reacts contrary to his pilot instinct, but also competes against a partner like Charles Leclerc, who has at his disposal a unit that, although officially identical, offers greater confidence and stability. In each race, this difference translates into lower classifications, condition strategies, and increasing pressure from the media and the fans. The headlines already talk about the great lost opportunity of Hamilton and if their signing by Ferrari was a calculation error. Within the team, the finding has also generated tensions. Some engineers suspect that the problem is a consequence of excessively focused on Leclerc, who has been the reference pilot for years in Maranello. Others defend that it is a simple chain of quality control errors and manufacturing tolerances. But the fact that the problem has been detected so late opens an uncomfortable question. If the priority in Ferrari is to ensure that both cars are at the highest level, or if it exists, even if it is unintentionally, a preferential pilot in development. If Ferrari fails to correct the problem before the middle of the season, the consequences can go beyond 2025. Hamilton could rethink its long-term commitment to the team, especially if it perceives that the technical structure cannot guarantee a competitive car. The pilot market is already agitated with unexpected movements, and a discontent of this magnitude in a figure of its caliber would be sufficient for other teams, even those that seem stable today, consider a blow of effect in their alignments. In Maranello they know it. This is not just a mechanical problem, it is a fire test for the credibility of the Ferrari-Hamilton project. If they manage to solve it in time, the narrative will change completely and could recover ground in the second half of the year. But if they fail, it will be recorded as another chapter in the long list of fianched opportunities of Ferrari, and perhaps as the episode that marked the beginning of the end of the last great bet of Lewis Hamilton in Formula One. What Vasseur and his team have uncovered in the SF25 of Lewis Hamilton is much more than a simple technical failure. It is a reminder that, in Formula One, perfection is not optional. Each millimeter of carbon fiber, each adjustment in the suspension, and each calibration in the brake system can be the difference between winning a championship or being relegated to the middle of the table. In this case, those invisible differences to the naked eye have cost not only performance but also trust, both in the car and in the structure that builds it. Hamilton is not a pilot who gives up easily. His career is plagued by impossible seasons in which he has managed to reverse adverse situations and turn them into victories. But here, the challenge is not only with its rivals, but with the machine itself that its weapon should be. The seven-time champion faces the paradox of having to change his style to adapt to a car that, on paper, should adapt to him. And that process, if it extends too much, can erode even the moral of the most experienced competitor. For Ferrari, the case is a credibility test. Solving the root problem and doing it transparently would send a clear message that the team is committed to giving equal conditions to its pilots and that it is not afraid to recognize errors to correct them. Failing in this mission, on the other hand, would reinforce the narrative that Maranello is still trapped in old dynamics, where the solutions are late and the opportunities are wasted. The rest of the season is presented as a race against the clock. Every weekend without significant improvements move away the title options and bring the risk of an irreversible disenchantment. If Ferrari manages to deliver to Hamilton a car that can really squeeze, not only will he have on track a pilot capable of winning races, but also an ambassador who will reinforce the faith of millions of tifosi in which the team can return to the top. But if the solution does not arrive on time, the story will be written in another way. In the F1 books, this chapter could remain as one of the great lost opportunities. The year in which the union of a historical champion with the most iconic team was frustrated not due to the lack of talent, but for a set of technical errors that should never exist. And in a sport where second opportunities rarely appear, such lessons are usually irreversible.